The better you are at cold calling, the more valuable you are in the marketplace. I've made over 50,000 cold calls in my 4-year software sales career. I have nothing to sell you because I still grind daily, making dials on this headset in the office you see behind me. Imagine the most inspirational business leaders that you look up to. The reason you admire them is because they have accomplished things that you view, and people in general, view to be challenging or difficult. The more you cold call, the more interesting you actually become to other people. And let me explain this phenomenon. I was on my company President's Club trip because I was a top performer last year, closing nearly $1 million in revenue my first year in seat as an account executive. I was in this caravan going to ATV on the countryside. I was with some pretty high senior leaders at my company, and they said, "What's your name? Tell us what you do, et cetera, et cetera." And I said, "My name is Trent Russell, and I've made 50,000 cold calls at this company." And they said, "Hold on, how many cold calls have you made?" I said, "Yeah, I started here as an SDR. I've made nearly 50,000 cold calls." And they said, "How do you even go about doing that?" And I started explaining my process. One of the enterprise reps in the car says, "I want to move you out to Georgia. I want you to start generating pipeline for me." And people found it interesting because they knew in the face of obstacles that I have set hundreds of meetings, that I've been rejected thousands of times. And it's this cyclical nature of facing success and failure at the same time, and people respect that. So it's actually something interesting to be able to talk about, and there's so many life lessons that you can actually parallel to cold calling for a living. One in particular is taking action in the face of fear. When we think back to the people we look up to, we are motivated because we know that they have accomplished things that we believe to be difficult, if not challenging or impossible ourselves, such as starting billion-dollar companies. And when you take action despite your brain telling you not to, that's actually a superpower. And you will train that every day making cold calling. I was sitting at one of these desks behind me when I first started as an SDR. In between my cold calling blocks, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't have a script. I'd be looking at Salesforce, I'd be looking at the company website, the prospect's LinkedIn page, and I would just be delaying the call because I was scared that I would get rejected and I would embarrass myself in front of all the other reps that used to be in the office when we were back in person 5 days a week. And yes, that was a thing. The girl next to me who had been there about a year, she said, "Trent, what are you doing?" And I said, "I'm researching." And she said, "Research is the last thing you should be doing in between calls. You should press call and figure out what to say after." And it's so simple, it's so subtle, but it's also profound. It's when you face that resistance of your brain telling you, hey, you shouldn't do it because fear is on the other side. All the best things in life are on the other side of fear, such as setting meetings, such as getting that date, such as advancing your life forward. And when it comes down to cold calling, your brain is going to tell you not to do it, but you need to press call and you'll figure out what to say afterwards. And I've used this in my own life so many times when I want to go talk to a girl, when I want to go do something in my professional life to go advance my career, when I want to help myself in my relationships. It's when your brain tells you you shouldn't do it, but you know you need to do it, you just go take the action despite any given set of circumstances. And that's one of the most important aspects of cold calling and why you ought to double down. And more importantly, we find ourselves in a changing business landscape. Let me unpack this. Some people think we might be in a recession. We might be headed towards a recession. This is negative GDP growth over 2 quarters. Basically, the economy is shrinking instead of getting bigger. This is not a good thing. What this means for you and I is that companies start to contract their budgets, they start to reduce spending, and procurement cycles get longer. So if you work in sales like I do, it's going to start getting a lot harder. And I've already started to see this with companies I work with, and they say, hey, it's mandated by our CEO. We're cutting expenses. We're cutting software spend. We're actually slowing down headcount growth. So this job market we found ourselves in, it's actually going to start to get harder to get hired because companies are going to start to hire less frequently. And they're actually going to start laying a lot more people off. And you've already seen it. You've seen Robinhood, you've seen Carvana, you've seen Klarna, you've seen Netflix. And there's going to be a lot more companies that are starting to lay off employees. And the reason for this is because with interest rates going up, money is more expensive, and the market is now rewarding profitability, meaning margins need to be bigger. On Amazon's recent quarterly earnings call, what they said is that we are moving away from space and labor, meaning large distribution and getting as many people in the door as possible, employees, and we are moving towards efficiency and productivity. Companies going forward, all they're going to care about and prioritize is efficiency and productivity. And when we look at the tech marketplace, a lot of these smaller tech companies that got these massive funding rounds, their valuations are cut. So they're going to be under enormous pressure. They're going to continue to lay off. These big tech companies are going to capitalize on it. You can see Amazon increasing their base pay. You can see Microsoft increasing their equity compensation awards. You can see Google increasing people's abilities to make more money from performance-based grants. So these big tech companies are going to benefit, and that's where a lot of the talent's going to go. But ultimately, being able to cold call, and yes, I'm pulling this all back together, being able to cold call, it's actually a future-proof skill set because your services will always be in demand. Despite working at a small company, a big company, anywhere in between, what companies need is productivity and efficiency. And what's most important for tech companies specifically is revenue growth. You need to make more money, you need to acquire more customers. So sales is actually the last department to get cut, and also engineering. So when I look at my company headcount, the two largest departments are sales and engineering. Every other department is at more risk of layoff because they're actually less efficient than sales from just a bottom line productivity standpoint, because you're getting paid XYZ a year, let's say $100,000 a year. How is your work contributing to revenue growth? Ask yourself that and actually go look at that. If you're a salesperson, you're naked in a way because the scorecard is out there, you can't hide. Whereas if you're in operations or another role like that, you may not be quite as valuable because you don't know how to cold call. And that's why you ought to double down on cold calling. And then finally, being able to cold call well, it will actually improve your life as it relates to your communication. Communication is an essential part of life. And as we think about what communication means, I think it boils down to making other people feel special. If you've ever read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, one of the baseline premises is people care more about themselves than what you think of them. They really care about feeling special. They want to feel loved. They want the loss aversion. And they just want that stability in their life because that's their animalistic brain saying survival mode at all costs. So you helping people feel special actually makes you more valuable to them. So when you're cold calling, the ability to, one, listen, quickly interpret information. You get objections all the time when you are cold calling, which I made a video recently talking about most common objections and how I overcome them and my framework for overcoming objections. You'll actually face objections in your personal life as well. As you think about ordering food, trying to convince people what movie you want to go to, plans. Should we go to your family's house for Christmas? Or my family's house for Christmas. There's all sorts of scenarios that you'll find yourself in these interpersonal communication dynamics. Number one is the ability to listen, and then number two is communicate, so making people feel special. So when you're cold calling, you learn in 15 seconds how to quickly articulate value. If you can succinctly convey your message and the outcome it means for them, you absolutely can listen to another person and convey to them why they are more special in that given moment. And if you find yourself leaving people better off than when you first started interacting with them, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So you doubling down on cold calling at work will actually indirectly help you to improve your communication dynamics, make other people feel special, and actually lead to a more enriching life for you. And that's really powerful. I'm glad we brought that all together. The final point I wanted to say is, as a cold caller, you are a hunter. If you think about evolutionarily, in order to survive, you need hunters. You also need gatherers. Both are important to a society. But in particular, would you rather be the hunter, the person that is going out to assert their will, to change nature, opposed to that person sitting back, just waiting for things to happen? I want to be the hunter. I want to have the weapon in my hands. I want to go out and I want to go claim meat for my survival, for the well-being of my family, everyone I know, in my future state as well. So you, as the cold caller, you are employed to go interrupt people, to disrupt their day. And you'll naturally be scared to do this because you know that you are facing fear, you're facing rejection, you're facing that feeling of not being loved, of welcomed. And these are deep-rooted human insecurities and feelings and vulnerabilities. And that's why, to point one, in the face of those, you still need to take action. And you are the hunter who is going to go claim what's yours, and you're not going to wait back and be given to it, because you're proactive and you're going to go get what you want so that you can improve the state of your life, your family's life, and attract as much success, money, status, prestige as you want. That's why you ought to double down on cold calling. If you enjoyed today's video, hit the like button right now. Subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. Happy cold calling.